Once you can slow it down on your end, you can start to communicate effectively. You can start to communicate the boundaries that you have. You can start to figure out what your boundaries are and why they're important to you and how to express them. And if something happens and you can slow it down, you can have adult conversations about resolving issues rather than just blowing up. And then once you can get some of these things under control, you don't have to be a master at them all. Everybody can be better at communicating. It doesn't matter who you are. And
Yeah.
everybody can be a little more empathetic because you don't know what happened to them that day, especially in co-parenting.
Welcome to the Everyday Epigenetics Raw, Real, Relatable podcast. I'm your host, Susan Robbins, epigenetic human performance coach. This is where we discuss all things lifestyle, environment, food, exercise, work, mind, and social interaction as they pertain to epigenetic expression in a way that's relatable to everyone. So if you're ready to start viewing you as an individual, take control of your life and health, and get results, buckle up, here we go. Welcome to the Everyday Epigenetics Raw, Real, Relatable podcast. I'm your host, Susan Robbins, and this is the place where we talk about everything lifestyle and environment and how it relates to our genetic expression. For those of you watching, I've been trying to figure out my light. It's a new standing desk. It's right on my glasses. They will be coming off, so bear with me. I have to keep them on so I can read my guest bio. So hopefully it's not too distracting. But buckle up today. If you are a parent in a co-parenting relationship with younger kids, or you know someone who is, and who doesn't know someone that is these days, right? With enough of divorced parents. And we're going to be talking about healthy co-parenting today. When we connected, and he said, I work with healthy co-parenting. And I thought, well, how in the hell could I get that to relate to epigenetics? And then it hit me like I was a cop for over 14 years. My last 10 and a half years, I worked with public housing and I had 2 family housing projects. Lots of little kids in there, lots and lots of, sadly, a lot of conflict, violence, parents that couldn't get along, children having to parent their parents. And what happens is this is a huge trauma to these children. And we know that childhood trauma itself at any age, it's traumatic to parents too. But I'm really thinking about the kids here, that childhood trauma affects DNA expression. Trauma itself affects DNA expression. And it's going to affect the expression for these kids when they have kids down the road. We know it's a cycle with trauma and epigenetics. And so I thought this is actually fantastic to get on here because I think so many people are going to be able to relate to this, and that it actually affects genetic expression. There are very specific genes that childhood trauma can dial up or dial down. And I have those issues from my childhood trauma, and it affects certain foods I eat. And that's one of the ones that's probably less bothersome than a lot of other things. But my guest today is JP Marsh. JP is a 42-year-old single. Are you single and looking? If so, we'll give you a promo.
I'm not closed off. We'll say it that way.
So you're single and available single.
Right.
Girl dad to a 10-year-old. He has been co-parenting for 8 years, and he said healthy co-parenting for over 6 years now. He's gone from conflict to collaboration in his journey, and it's helped him identify the mindset shifts, emotional healing, and negative thought patterns that keep parents from putting their differences aside and putting their children first. Now he's a coach, speaker, and advocate for the benefits of getting out of your own way and moving forward. So I'm excited to have this conversation. Like I said, I'm not a parent, but I have experienced it from the law enforcement side, and it can go super smoothly or it's super sad.
Right.
So welcome to the program, Mr. JP Marsh.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm happy to be here. It it's a pleasure.
Awesome. So let's start off by first of all, everybody's going to want to know what's
Mhm.
your story? How did you get here? Apparently, if you've been co parenting for 8 years and
Mhm.
then healthy co parenting for a little over six, there was a couple of crappy years in there that brought you to this and to your insights. Yeah.
Yeah.
Give us a scoop.
There's always the trauma and baggage of any divorce or breakup or death, you know what I mean? And if you're
Uh,
unwilling to grieve, whether it be death, the relationship, or any of those things, then you're stuck and you're not moving forward, which is some of our issues, or my issues when we were trying to figure out the co-parenting and after we split up and all that stuff, because you can't be stuck in the past and try to move forward at the same time because you're just resisting both and you're not going anywhere. And outside of that, we had the normal stuff that everybody goes through when you get divorced or break up or any of those things. I was super defensive no matter what, because that was the
uh,
habit that I was in from the relationship, that I was undervalued, being attacked, being criticized, whatever internal dialogue and personal baggage that I was carrying from the relationship I was carrying after. I'd get a message, get super defensive, react instead of respond, send something back. That would go on for 2 or 3 days, and then it turned into a phone call that was a big blow up and all this stuff. Like the normal cycle
huh.
of I dug my heels in, they dig their heels in, and
Yep.
we're both going to impose our pose our wheels and still try to control the other person or be. You're just caught in your emotions and you're seeing everything through the
Yep.
angry lens, and
Yep.
it's really easy to get into that habit, stuck in that routine, and lose sight of, is this healthy for my daughter? Is this the kind of relationships that I want my daughter to have later in life? Is this how I want to teach my daughter that adults interact with each other and people speak to each other and act? But the first thing I had to do was take a look at my actions, what I was doing, how I was communicating, how I was handling situations. And I had childhood trauma and baggage that I had never dealt with and really had
Mhm.
no idea that it even existed until I just until after the breakup, and I'm a single dad and I got to accept this new reality and try to move forward and do all these things. And so I had to backtrack 30 years and start from there, rebuilding all of these things, because it's easy to put blame on the other person. But did I learn how to communicate effectively? No. And that's probably what led to some of our issues in the relationship and also the
Mhm.
issues that we're having now. Do I know how to set boundaries, hold boundaries, and explain my boundaries, communicate my boundaries to other people so that they know what they are, and I have a legitimate gripe when they're being disregarded or overstepped, as opposed to thinking everybody's a mind reader and you overstep my boundaries. Now I get to be mad when you have no idea that you. So you trying to get
Yeah.
out of that
Yeah.
kind of a vicious circle, but I had to go way back from living in emotionally disconnected upbringing
Mhm.
and
And were your
breaking.
parents together?
My parents were together up until my dad died. Yeah.
Okay.
But in a sense, essentially, I viewed my parents as roommates until I was like 17 years old, because I never saw my
Wow.
parents kiss, never saw my parents say, I love you. Nobody, my dad worked early in the morning all day, mom worked swing shift. And the only time anybody ever did anything, we all did something together as a family, like twice a year, we'd go camping trips, that kind of stuff. But other than that,
Mhm. Mhm.
my parents never took a trip alone, a weekend away. They didn't do date nights. I mean, they split up when I was like 15, 16 for a while
Mhm.
and then got back together, and that's when their relationship was different, more like a married couple instead of just two people raising
Sure.
kids, paying bills.
Yep. So
But
that's gonna weigh on you as to this is what a relationship is.
right, right.
Don't communicate, you don't yeah, it totally makes sense, okay?
Shut down,
Yeah.
hide, and do your own thing, and they can do their own all that stuff. But also in my childhood, it took me till I was well in my 30s to accept the fact that my parents did the best they could with the tools that they had. And understanding that and accepting that helped me understand and accept the fact that everybody screws their kids up. It just depends on how bad and how easily they can get through it, because you
True.
just don't know. In one way or another, nobody's nobody's perfect.
Nobody's
And
perfect. Nope. Nope.
and there was all these things that I told myself since I was a kid that I won't do this if I'm a parent, and my kids will. My household was a fairly disconnected emotionally household. And so I grew up with the forgotten child syndrome kind of mentality, even knowing I was the youngest of two,
Mm.
but you didn't really get any attention unless it was negative, for something negative that you did. My brother demanded a lot of attention, but I was a fairly easy kid. So I was just like there in the background all the time, which led into, the negative self-talk, not feeling worthy of love, needing to overplease
Mhm.
everybody in order to somebody to like me, and all of these things that are not healthy, can't have healthy relationships with these things and those things. And so healing from those has helped me be a loving dad to my daughter, show her love, have empathy for her mom, understand that her mother's personality is the way that it is. It's not like mine, and not maybe necessarily the way that I want her to act or be, but I accept that that's how she is.
Mhm.
She
Mhm.
needs to, when we're traveling, she needs to know when we're getting on the flights, when we're getting off the flights, when the layover's over, when we get to the car, she needs all of these details. I am not that parent. They go on vacation, and my daughter will FaceTime me a couple times, and I'm having so much fun, this and that. And I could start conflict and be mad at her like she's trying to control me or do these things, or I can just accept that she likes to have all this information, that because that's her.
That's
I
her. I
I don't
guarantee
need
it's how
all that
she's
information.
biologically.
Right. Right.
Yes, she's created that way.
Right.
That's yeah, for sure. Yep. You're very different. Was there like a turning point or an incident that kind of flipped things for you and you said, this isn't healthy?
Right. Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean,
This is gonna be good.
we were so when so we had a house that we had bought together, we're paying on or whatever. It was all in her name, so it wasn't like that big of a deal. We weren't divorced, we were unmarried. But I moved out. And what everybody does when you're starting over after divorce, after a breakup, whatever, with a child anyway, you go to your parents' house and you're starting from scratch, and this is life. And I moved out, and I work in construction as a day job and all that stuff. So I need my pickup. And I blew the transmission in my pickup like a week after I'd moved out. And then 2 weeks after that, my dad died unexpectedly. And so
Wow.
I lose the life and reality I have. I lose my mode of transportation and my lifeline to survive, make money, do my job, all of those things. Plus be a parent, because I got to be able to drive around, pick my daughter up and do all that stuff. And then my dad dies unexpectedly, which he was training to try to qualify for the Boston Marathon, and he was out on his Sunday morning run and had a heart attack,
Cardiac.
stroke type deal. And
Wow.
so then I got all this stuff I'm dealing with, but then I'm also at my mom's while she's grieving my dad, and I can't escape. My brother could go home and detach from
Mhm.
all this stuff. So I went into this depressive state, to say it mildly. Like for quite a while, all I did was go to work and hang out with my daughter and nothing else.
Mhm.
Didn't go socialize, detached from reality, detached from society and friends and everything else. But I was so like in my anger, in my hurt feelings, in my grief, and not knowing how to emotionally heal and do any of these things because it wasn't a place I was raised in that sort of an environment. So it was
Yeah. Yeah.
the only thing I knew how to do was what on TV from Rambo movies and all these things in the 80s and 90s when I was a kid, bottle it up, and bottle it up, and bottle it up, but nobody ever shows you the explosion that's going to continuously erupt from
Yep.
all this bottling emotions and not being able to feel feelings and to deal with grief and do all these things. And then you throw on the poking back and forth and triggering each other with my daughter's mom, and then the big explosions on the phone, and we'd done that for off and on for the first year and a half,
Hmm.
and we were screaming at each other on the phone. I was out back, and I was doing. It was just one of them screaming matches, and I looked over, and my 3-year-old daughter's standing there crying, and my mom's looking at me like I'm a fucking piece of shit, and it's just like.
Yeah. Yep.
It's just like, this is not how I wanna live my life. This is not the example I wanna show my daughter that this is how men treat women. This is not how I don't wanna deal with this anxiety and stress and throw my nervous system into rampant hysteria once a month, every few weeks, and be depressed and do all these things. And so then it was a deal where it was like, I don't want to be like this. I don't want my daughter to grow up around this because whether she's with me or her mom, she's getting it all the time.
Yep.
It's not
She's
like she's
never getting, and she was
only
only 3. She
right
was only
3,
three
4,
at the
yeah,
time. Shoot.
yeah. And so then it became a deal of I downloaded Audible and started listening to like as many books
Mhm.
about trauma and mental health and psychology and personal development and then it sprawled into books on business and books on negotiating and books on personalities and perspective shifts. And then it sprawled out into the spider web of everything when you start getting into improving yourself, making
Sure.
changes, trying to make sure the changes that you're trying to implement, you've done the work, set it up to where they can take root and last. That's the hardest part is setting it up and doing it to where these new habits take hold and the new way of thinking becomes your way of thinking. And mindfulness training was probably the biggest thing for me because I could get out of my own head. Once I started accepting thoughts and emotions as just what they are and let them go, as opposed to diving into them and letting them overtake me and doing that kind of stuff. And then it's
Yeah. Because it's healthy to have them. It's just it's knowing how to process and allowing them to process, and that's when you can get past them. If you don't, like you said, then you have these blow ups that are
right,
not healthy for anybody and create so much stress inside your body.
right,
Again, affecting just stress affects everything.
right. And up until around that point, from my childhood stuff, I hid from myself with drinking heavily because it
Mhm.
numbed me and I didn't have to. You talk about childhood trauma and these things, and if you really don't want to deal with them, then you're going to find ways to avoid them: drugs, alcohol, workaholic, sex,
Yep.
whatever you want
Any
to dive
addiction.
all the way into.
Yeah. Yeah.
So for a lot of years, I numbed myself with drinking and doing all that stuff. And when I started healing, then I really had to go through and heal a bunch because I had all this other stuff that I never really processed or tried to deal with. But you start mixing in some things that are mind altering, the explosions are going to be a lot bigger and your emotions
Mhm.
are going to be a lot more erratic. And the lows, especially with alcohol, lows are a lot lower when the depressant part of it
Yeah, it's
starts
a
wearing
depressant.
off and
Sure.
hitting on you and all that stuff.
Sure.
Really, I sat down and with a lot of intention and mapped out the best version of myself, the best role model of myself for my daughter, the best friend that I can be for other people, and then tried to figure out what steps I can take to get to these places and get to these personality traits that I want, get to these thought processes that I want.
Mhm. So is this where you were like, I need to teach this to other people when you had all these epiphanies and worked through it? And you said, like, I just wrote down where you said, map out the best version of yourself. What does that look like? And is that something that's easy for other people? like that they'd be able to do, and looking at this and just saying, I'm not happy with who I am and my behavior. It's affecting my children. It
Right.
could be affecting my spouse, estranged or not, friends.
Mhm.
Can you talk a bit about that, mapping out the best version of yourself?
The easiest way to 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 get it to make sense is, for anybody listening, if you were gonna go on a cross country trip to a city that's on the other side of the country, you can either get in your car and try to drive there,
Mhm.
or you can put the address in your GPS, and then every step of the way, it's gonna tell you left and right, and left and right, and left and right. And so the destination is where you wanna be, how you wanna react in situations, what kind of healing, what kind of all the things that you want out of life, whether it be mental, physical, diet, relationships, all that stuff. Then it's reverse engineering. If I want to be in this kind of a co-parenting relationship, am I the co-parent I want to deal with?
Mhm.
Do I communicate the way that I want them to communicate with me? Do I show them the respect that I think that they should be showing me? You know what I mean? And those kinds of things.
Mhm.
And once you start figuring out how you want it to be, then you figure out how you can make it that way. But it still takes time. Like
Sure.
even after I had gotten to where I was, you know, I I had to get a journal. And so when I'd get a text, because it sent my nervous system into a I
Right
would want
away?
I would want to
The
react.
rush?
I I would see it through the angered lens. I'd get that rush, and I would want to just say,
Yep.
and I would poke back. And once
Yep.
I figured out that was a trigger, that was my issue, that was something I was doing, I got a notebook and started writing down the responses that I was instantly wanting to send. And if it wasn't something that needed to be answered right then,
Mhm.
I'd set it down and go do something else and then come back to it when my nervous system calmed down, when my mental state was better, when I was back
Yep.
to me and I could look at the response, and 99% of the time I'm like, fuck, I'm not sending that. It's just going to
It's a
start a
whole different
fight.
perception, isn't it? When
It's,
you check your
yeah.
side, so I tell my clients all the time, check yourself, especially those of us that are action oriented, we're very reactionary,
Mhm.
and I have to too. Check yourself before you wreck yourself. Because we can I used to say it's like the pit viper. You're
Right.
ready to just it's again, it's a defensive tactic because of that. And
Right.
so the journaling, you would stop
Hmm.
and maybe even jot down in your journal,
Hmm.
like some things, put it in perspective.
Right. And come back to it later the next day. Most of the time it was a reaction instead of a response. And then I could figure out the response that I wanted to actually send. And even not saying that it's the case, but or not in my case, but I see in a lot of co-parenting and a lot of parents, divorced parents, because they're so stuck in their own pity party of hurt feelings, hate you, all this different stuff. But also a lot of people get in the habit or get accustomed to feeding off of the reaction. And so they'll intentionally try to push your buttons because they know you'll explode. They
'Cause I
know
know.
you'll freak
Yep.
out. They'll know they
Then
can
you look like
be,
the bad guy.
you're the bad guy, they're the victim. They can get some sympathy or attention
Yep.
or whatever, whatever.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
the less that you give them if you quit giving them the reaction they're looking for, they're going to stop looking for it because they're not getting they're not getting that rush of
Yeah.
adrenaline or that surge of come feel sorry for me. I can make you out to be that guy. But it, it's hard and people really struggle with it, but it's hard to get out of this lens of the other person and see what it's doing to your kids, what it's going to do to your kids long term, and what's best for your kids in the moments that you're doing these things.
Absolutely.
Because you get so used to reacting
Yeah.
that you totally just are oblivious to all of the damage in your wake that's getting swept up in this.
Mhm. So question,
Mhm.
you're making all these changes, and are you seeing changes in the other person? do you find it beneficial to say to the other person, "Hey, this is what I've noticed. It's crushing our son, our daughter, both, whatever. Do you wanna get on board with me with this and see if we can create something better? Or did you took this on by yourself, but because you changed your behavior to healthier because you can't control the other person. So you might be able to
Right.
get them on board, but you might not. And depending on how deep they are in their own shit, right? Like they get in the muck. And
Right.
it's easier to just stay there in it than to recognize the muck and pull yourself out. I guess my question being like bringing them on board, or if they choose to say no, you're a piece of shit and I'm good. And this is what I would hear, like literally hear this stuff out there all the
Right.
time. And I've been a step parent. I've heard it. I've seen the toxic, really, just the name call, it's just everything. So if the other person's not on board, just for you, because we know we can't control anybody other than ourselves, but you taking that control inside of you to create a bit of a ripple effect that if you can't trigger me or
Right.
I don't allow you to trigger me in the way you do, then you're automatically starting to get behavioral changes. Do they pick at first and realize that it's like huff and a puff, can't blow the house down,
Right.
so I'm gonna back off, right? Uh,
It Yes. Yeah. People are dictated by their habits and
$100%.
what is their standard, their normal. It's always like this, it's always like this, it's always like this. Same as breaking a bad habit and setting a new habit. They don't happen overnight. So if you got 10 years, it wouldn't be any different than somebody who's been an alcoholic for 20 years is going to have a little bit more struggles than somebody who's been an alcoholic for a year. And so to break a bad habit, it takes longer the longer it's been the bad habit. Healthy eating is not overnight. It's not a quick fix. You can't control the other person, but you can control yourself.
Amen.
And that is enough. But regardless of how they act and how they feel and all of those different things, if you're authentic and you come from a genuine place, now you might feel different and have done a bunch of work and maybe they see it, maybe they don't. Your actions over a period of time is the only thing that's going to show them that you're actually different. Because I'm
Mhm.
in almost every divorce case and breakup and all these different things, you probably broke up or split up or fought like that. Oh, I'll change, I'll change, I'll change, I'll change. You've said that 100 times. It's only the actions that are actually going to
Yeah.
make it real. And so you may not get to a place like I'm at with co-parenting, but there's something to be said about being able to be in the same room. Something about being able to be civil and have adult conversations about your children without it turning into me, you from shit that happened 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 years ago. You know what I
Oh,
mean?
yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
but that's part of letting go of the baggage and letting go of the relationship and you know what I mean? But
Mhm.
terminology makes a difference, how you speak to each other, the level of respect and
How you
that you
speak to
give
yourself
and
even.
give. Right.
Yeah.
Like I never call my daughter's mother my ex because that's not who she is in my life.
Mhm.
You know what I mean?
So
And
how do you refer to her? What do you think is a healthy way?
uh, either by
Just her
name
name?
or my daughter's mother. But when you say ex, if I go and I'm talking to somebody and I'm like, "Oh yeah, my ex," that's negative terminology, which makes everybody's perception be like, "Ugh,
Yeah.
I bet they
Right.
fight all
So
the time."
I
You
just
know what I mean?
you
And
at
that's
the
the
same
response.
time.
But when you say,
Ugh.
"Oh, my daughter's mother," and stuff, they're like, "Oh, it's her name." Da,
Yeah.
da, 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 da.
Yep.
And it's a two
Yep.
completely different conversations with two completely different energies. And she's not my ex. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? I've been in relationships since.
Mhm.
So it's my daughter's mother.
Yep.
That's who she is in my reality. That's who she is in my daughter's life. And even the terminology and the language that you use around your kids
Yes.
matters and makes a big difference because at one point when my daughter was fairly young and I was at my mom's and all that stuff and we were in a better place by then, but my mom had said something to me. She would, "What do you what do you think that they her family or her friends and da 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 da, you badmouth you or do this, do that, blah blah blah. And I'm like, I don't think about it because it's out of my control and it doesn't fucking matter because this is what I can control.
Yep.
I can show up at every school function, every parent teacher conference, every dance recital, every soccer game. I can be on time when I pick her up and be on time when I drop her off, and I can be where I'm supposed to say I'm going to be. I can be available when she calls and needs me to take her for extra time and do these things. I can be respectful, and the rest is out of my control. My actions are going to show volumes more to my daughter who I am and to everybody that maybe has heard negative things about me.
Mm.
They're not going to be able to believe the negative things if my actions aren't aligning.
Yep. Lip service gets you so far. It is true, the adage of, and I was just talking with my boyfriend about this last night. Actions speak louder than words.
Mhm.
You can say anything all day long to try to get people to believe you, but you make one movement,
Right.
negative, positive, that's the lasting impression. It's not
Right.
typically what you said, but it's how you made them feel, how you left that. And that's the impression that leaving on these children.
Right.
And I've seen, as like I said, I've been part of a step family, and my I dated a guy, this is 10 years ago. Where's the time go? And he had his daughter's mother. I'm working with this. His daughter's mother, and then his parents were friends with her parents.
Mhm.
So his parents came to visit from Texas and wanted to get together with the other set of grandparents. And so we all had to go to dinner. And I was like,
Right.
okay, this is uncomfortable. I'm
Right.
Even though I was good, I got along fine with the mother. It was weird to me to sit there with the grandparents where they're all talking, and I'm like, I don't fit here.
Right.
Yet them be able to interact. So that was me. That was just the selfish
Right.
part of me, right? Going, I don't fit anywhere in here. This is really uncomfortable.
Right.
But yet for them to all be able to have both sense of grandparents interact, the
Right.
parents interact in a healthy manner. His daughter is now in her, I think she's a senior in college this year. Like, where the hell's time go?
Right.
Uh, but so much better developed emotional intelligence through that kind of an interaction. Not to say they didn't have their verbal sparring moments because they hear it on the phone.
Right.
Yeah, but you have some parents or some families that they still will get together even with current spouses
Right.
that are different and have holidays together.
Right. We do
And
that.
all they want, right? And the kids, if that works, great. But it's the ones where it's just like you've been describing of this yelling, screaming, name calling, and these poor children just want to have some sense of normalcy.
Right. And it's the yelling and the screaming and the chaos never helps.
Yeah.
Especially the kids because now they're accustomed to chaos. They grow up in chaos and everything's toxic and that's their normal and that's what they're gonna seek,
Yep.
find, accept, and live with. Whether you I think that's what you're ingraining in them and conditioning them for or not, that's what it is. But then
Absolutely.
also you have these ideas that when you're talking shit about the other parent, you're just talking shit about the other parent. But almost every person and kid that I've ever talked to thinks that they're 50% mom, 50% dad. So you're basically beating the shit out of your kids verbally nonstop.
Yep.
You're not necessarily directly saying it to the kid, but they still think they're half dad. You know what I mean? And so then now you're raising these kids that are going to be emotionally stunted, think that mom doesn't love them, dad hates them, half of them, whatever, this and that. And that's a whole nother bag of trauma to try to get through because where
Sure.
you fit in the world.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
If my
Yeah.
parents
Get
don't love
lost.
me, who will? And
Yeah.
you know
Yeah. So they'll
that's
start looking for
know
love in the wrong places because it
right.
hasn't, or
And
the super anxious attachment
right,
of, "Oh my god, what if I'm left? What if I'm not?"
right,
Or on the flip side, the avoidance, like
right,
that are that total fear. It's either gonna be of losing their autonomy or getting left because it's just fear.
Right.
And it creates these people that, and I mean, you see it even later in life. They are petrified getting close to someone.
Right.
It's like cut and
Right.
run, cut and run. And it all stems from that childhood attachment. And then
Right.
as life goes, because you, like you're saying, you tend to keep feeding those behaviors, even though you see it, it's not healthy. I shouldn't
Right.
feel like shit about myself, but
Right.
you can't help it until
Right.
you sit and say, all right, all these things are happening. I am the common denominator,
Right.
which is what you did. I'm the common denominator through this. The only one I have control over is myself. So, what tips do you have or steps do you have for these parents in these situations that are listening that they can start taking to start having healthier interactions with both the other parent, but also with their children to stop the bashing? And the other thing I saw was just, again, so many little kids having to parent their
Right.
parents and be their
Right.
sounding board. These are children. Your children
Right.
are not your sounding board. They're
Right.
not your best friend. They need parents that give
Right.
them
Right.
structure.
Right. They're You're right. You're right.
Not
They're
that you
not
can
they're
bounce your
not your
problems off
emotional
of a
crutch.
6-year-old.
And a lot of people use them as like an emotional crutch,
Yeah,
like
they are.
a therapist or a
Yeah.
friend. And it's the term son husband is a son husband for a reason, because
Mhm.
there's a whole slew of 20 to 25 or older people that still live at home and have no ambition to move out because mom will be alone, or dad mom hasn't gotten remarried since dad. And if I but
Yep.
that starts young with
Mhm.
the crutch, the emotional support crutch, the parent alienation types behaviors, where, oh my god, I miss you so much when you go to dad's house. It breaks my
Oh,
heart
the
when you have to
guilt.
leave. Yeah, and then they guilt the kids into not wanting to leave because mom will be alone and mom will be sad, and then you're emotionally
And it's your
stunting their
fault.
growth because they're not
Yeah.
going to ever get old. They're never going to mature past that age because I'm mommy's little teddy bear, mommy's bestie, da, 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 da. And I don't think a lot of it's, yes, some of it's intentional, and I think some people are just unaware of what they're doing and
Mm.
how it affects the people around them because they're a little too self-involved, or they are emotionally immature as far as the things that they're doing and saying around them, whether it's
Mhm.
generational curses, the way that they were raised. So you can blame a million different places for the different things, but
But still you.
it
Yeah.
is. And
At
that's
some
the
point,
way
you
you
just stop
are.
the
I mean,
excuses. It's just
right. But
you have control over you.
but awareness.
Yeah.
I would say probably the most important thing for anybody is being aware of where you are, where you want to be, what you're doing, what you're saying, how you're representing yourself, how you're treating people. You know what I mean? Because I think the instant gratification of our world over the last
Mhm.
10 or 15 years has made it so hustle and bustle and fast paced that nobody slows down to really think about either what they're doing, what they're saying, how they're acting, or what's going on around them. Because everybody is so quick to react.
React.
You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Whether
Or
it's
think they have to.
and
Think they
so
have to because texting, we need
right,
that response right
right.
away.
I want strawberries, so I'm
It's a
gonna
lot.
go on Amazon or have the grocery store. You know what I mean? Like, it was a different world when you had to wait for things to be in season or wait for something to come around. You know what I mean? Now it's instant.
Mhm.
And so people are so like, it's just become habit. And I'm guilty of it too, of just snap judgment, snap
Sure. Sure.
responses, snap,
Sure.
snap, answer the
Mhm.
cell phone. Oh my God, somebody texts me. I got to text them back within 5 seconds or they're going to be mad.
Yep. Yeah.
And that causes a lot of confusion and a lot of these things. And, but once you can slow it down on your end, you can start to communicate effectively. You can start to communicate the boundaries that you have. You can start to figure out what your boundaries are and why they're important to you and how to express them. And if something happens and you can slow it down, you can have adult conversations about resolving issues rather than just blowing up or throwing fits like a 4-year-old or all of these different things. And then once you can get some of these things under control, you don't have to be a master at them all. Everybody can be better at communicating. It doesn't matter who you are. And
Yeah.
everybody can be a little more empathetic because you don't know what happened to them that day, especially in co
Mhm.
parenting, because you know them as they were, but maybe they got a dickhead boss now that they got to deal with all
Mhm.
the time. And then you're just dumping shit on top of that.
Yep.
Whereas they were the boss before. And then letting go of the baggage, the emotions that aren't serving you. I get that it's comfortable to stay in your misery, and I get that it's
Oh,
easier to have other people join your misery as opposed to
yeah.
letting it go, working through it. Like
Yeah, and
it's
having your
easy.
circle shrink.
It is. And not one of the big deals with co-parenting that I run into and people have guys are typically mad at the court system because they get railroaded, which I understand. And then they're mad about whatever the child support is, and I get it. One, you're worried about something that you can't control and you can't change because it's already done. So you're just beating the shit out of yourself nonstop for something that you have no control over. Two, you're crying about something that you're not actively trying to do anything about. You're not keeping records of all of this stuff that you're she's doing or not doing. You're not keeping track of you're not journaling the text messages, the her being late. You're not documenting any of this stuff to have any ammunition to change your situation. And if you feel like you got railroaded by the legal system, the judge, the mediators, court stuff,
Mhm.
are you reaching out to other dads, other fathers, other divorced people in your area to figure out if there's other people that are in the same situation? And are you guys banding together and going to the news station to figure out why this judge is doing this court system's doing this with no
Mhm.
and are you actively trying to make changes, or are you just sitting around stewing about it
Complaining.
and
Yeah, yeah.
blaming her and not that you don't have a legitimate gripe, but what are you doing proactively to change your situation, change the way that these things are? And then the
Mm.
double standards is usually falls in there too. People tend to get these double standards, especially with because it's your former partner. So you think that you have the right to know who they're dating, what they're doing when they
Mhm.
don't have the kids. You get to dictate what they do with your kids when they have them or not have them. And it becomes a deal where it's if you don't want them stalking you on Facebook, don't stalk them on Facebook. If if you're allowed to have a life
Yeah.
when you don't have your kids,
Yeah.
don't be driving by their house on Sunday morning when they don't have the kids to see if there's a car parked in the driveway. You know what I mean? And then when you can get to certain places and get to certain interactions where it's a little bit better in these things and those things, you can start making arrangements to see your kids more. We made a deal of right of first refusal. And so if say was supposed to have my daughter on the weekend or whatever, and her friends were going out to a concert or going floating on the river or whatever, it didn't matter. She would call me first before anybody else and it'd say, "Hey, are you busy? I'm gonna go do this. Da, 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 da. Do you want her or do you want me to call my parents, your parents, or babysitter, or whatever?"
Mhm.
But you have to have that level of respect and communication to not throw that shit back in their face the next time you guys get in an argument. Maybe next time you just shouldn't see your fucking kids if you don't want them when it's your time. I
Yeah.
mean, everybody has a life. You know, if some
Yeah. Yeah.
concert
Yep.
pops up and somebody's got an extra ticket, it doesn't mean that you like that band more than your kid or that you don't love your child. You have an
Yep.
opportunity to do something. So
You
not
have to
throwing
show
that
your
kind of
kid that
stuff in your face, you know what I mean? You can still
yeah.
have a
You
life.
yeah, and you need to show your children that you have a life as well, and
Mhm.
that it's healthy. to do these things. It's not like you're leaving this child every weekend that you
Right.
have them for all
Right.
week. It's a
Right.
big difference between a deadbeat parent and a parent that has an opportunity to go
Right.
enjoy some life as well.
Right.
It just
And
happened to be on that weekend.
I mean, it's a weird thought process deal that, is either habit or maybe comes from childhood. It wasn't necessarily something that I had struggled with,
Mhm.
but how does your mind all of a sudden go from it's okay to detach from your children when you're married and need a weekend or a date night or some alone time, or I'm going to send the kids to grandma and grandpa's because I just need a break. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
It's fine when you're married, but once you get divorced and you're not married anymore, then it's like you're the worst person on the face of
You're
the
the
earth.
terrible.
And I'm going
Yeah.
to remind
Yeah.
you of that. And I'm going to tell you that. And I'm going to beat it into your head. And it's wild. And then, then when you run into the dating part of it, then you open up a
Mhm.
whole new,
That's
another
a whole other
series of,
can.
right.
Oh, we could do a whole other podcast on that one, JP.
My
So
situation, mine was easy because we made a deal early on and I didn't know how beneficial it would be until years later. We made a deal that if we started dating somebody, either one of us, and it was getting serious, we got to meet that person before they were ever around our daughter
Mhm.
to get a feel for them. So there was never she never came over to my house and said, "Oh, mom's new boyfriend lives with us." You know what I mean? There was no bombs. We never got a bomb dropped on us
Oh,
about these things. I don't have to worry
yeah.
about it now because my daughter's in a blended family now. And so like I've already gone through that and that's that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
but she's older, she's a little older now too. So some of these things are make all of the agreements and the communications and all of these boundaries age appropriate
Yeah. Yeah.
because
Exactly.
me introducing her to six. Not that that's the case, but if I was to introduce her to 6, 7 women a year from the time she's 4 till she's 9, that's what she thinks healthy dating in
That's it.
this and so
Yeah.
that's
Oh, yeah.
that's the model I'm teaching her.
Oh, yeah. I used to see a different quote uncle every week with some of those moms. I'm like, "Oh my god, what are you doing with this child?" Or introducing a child, having a sleepover. And this isn't
Right,
in a judgmental way. I'm thinking only
right,
for the child and what they're thinking, how confusing it can be. Have a sleepover on a first date or a second date, and you're there,
right,
and well, who the hell is this? What is this doing? They think that's normal,
right,
and it's normal to them, but they're still confused.
right,
Is this the way it's supposed to be? And I will tell you, in public housing, I worked public housing for 10 and a half years. So I saw kids that were 5 when I started
right.
that started having their own kids
At
8,
14,
9
15,
years
16.
later
Right,
in the public housing going through the same thing. It's this learned behavior, and it again, it's yeah, we like I said, we could go on forever, but I have to cut time.
right.
We're at the end. But
That's fine.
but now tell us, you have that you do coaching. Are you doing coaching then
Yeah,
for this? So
right.
tell us who you work with and how they can reach you.
Parents, the obstacles, the mindset, the tendencies are fairly parallel, whether you're the mom or the dad. It just depends on what side of it you're on. But the deep rooted booby traps are usually the same. The mindset,
Yeah.
the way of thinking, the habits, and then everything I do runs through Instagram, which is just at JPMRSH. And then it's easier for people to send me messages there and do have it all in one place as opposed to spread out all over the places. I'm not
Sure.
a huge fan of social media, so I'm not really don't have much of a presence in a bunch of different places or anything like that.
Just catch him on Instagram. See, it says, is the at JP Marsh?
Yep, just no A
Oh,
in the last
so,
name.
so just MRSH, JP
Yep,
MRSH. Okay.
yep,
And you coach men and women.
right.
Okay. Awesome. Because there's some women that kind of groove better with a dude, and other dudes want a dude. So-
And it's it's an outside point of view that's been through it that doesn't have chips in your particular game.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm fairly I'm blunt. If you're the problem, I'll tell you you're the problem. And it's not
Mhm.
everybody's cup of tea, but it works well for the people that I work with. I'm
Yeah.
and it's hard to it's this situation's really hard because you have your camp of people and friends that are telling you that they're the problem and they have the exact same thing and nothing gets resolved because everybody's
Mhm.
telling you you're right, they're wrong, and the exact opposite for them. And nobody's willing to just be like, you're the fucking problem and they're the fucking problem. You know what I mean? You're both the fucking
Yeah.
problem.
You're both causing
Right.
issues with your children. Yeah, and each other, and you're making it worse. And yeah, so
Right.
it pays to have blood friends like us. Because
Right.
I actually, people know me. I would actually say that, and
Right.
I have. It's Susan, your delivery sucks. Okay, but you know what? You have that blunt friend that will actually tell you,
Right.
coming from a place of love. Just because we're blunt doesn't mean that we're not holding space for you, right?
Exactly.
In a beautiful way. It's just how we're just that voice of reason. But so get a hold of JP if you are having some issues with co-parenting and you want a healthier environment, not just for yourself, but for your children and your children's children. Please, people, again, this epigenetically makes a difference. Lifestyle and environment, how it affects how our DNA expresses. So this lifestyle, the trauma can turn really good genes down and some really crappy genes up. So every decision that you're making for your young children is affecting their genetic expression as well as yours. Some really great conversations. Hey, we could have gone. I was like, are we going to fill an hour with this? Yes. And 2 minutes extra.
Oh yeah.
Um, but thank you for coming on.
Of course.
I hope some people reach out to you because there's so many out there that need help. If you, I- people, we all know, we all can think of someone right off the top of our heads that's going through this. There's help out here, and share this podcast, please, and see if we can get some help for these parents and these children to stop the cycle and start living healthier ways. So thank you, JP Marsh. It's a pleasure having you on. Wonderful conversation. Everybody, thank you for listening. Get out there, make it a great day, and be your most authentic selves. Thanks for listening. Thank you for tuning into my podcast. If you enjoyed this week's episode, I'd love for you to share it with someone who'd find the information useful. Please leave a review anywhere you listen to podcasts, and it'll help the information get out to others. If you're interested in seeing if we're a great fit to work together, the link is in the show notes below where you can sign up for a free consultation with me. So go make it a great day and let your authentic self shine.